You just walked out of an interview. You pause for a moment, step aside, and think to yourself, did I ace it? Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jennifer Fellon. I am a career strategist and leadership expert here to help you bridge the gaps of where you are to where you want to be inside your career. You're welcome to travel over to my website, jenniferfellon.com, where I host a tremendous amount of different blog articles, as well as my podcast, the Career Vault Podcast. I host a numerous amount of career development courses for you, as well as I offer one-on-one coaching. You've clicked through this video because you're genuinely interested if you got the job after an interview. Whenever we interview, there's telltale signs that are very common that are out there that are really going to hone in if you did well on the interview or if you did poorly. Let's dive in to check out what those different signs are that show and help you identify if you got the job. Anytime that we go into an interview, there's all these different types of nerves, butterflies, and we really look at it as, hey, did I impress them? Will I get the job? And what I wanted to do is I really wanted to take time out to create a video that really gives the different types of signs if you got the position or if you didn't. So over this, we're going to dive into 5 different tips that really show if you did or if you didn't land the job. So let's dive into the first one. And the first one is really a positive body language. Whenever you dive into any type of interview, body language is always key to see if somebody is truly actively listening or are they passively listening. These are 2 different cues of social intelligence that you really want to hone in on when you're interviewing. Is the interviewer engaged? Is their interviewing skills, are they involved? Are they listening? Are they leaning in? So when we look at a person's nonverbal cues, what are you looking for to see if an interviewer is engaged? Well, a lot of the time an interviewer will start nodding, they'll start leaning in forward, and they'll really start showing a genuine interest in what your answers are to the first few questions. And you'll notice this right off the gate. Inside other videos, I've talked numerous times that the very first question is the most important question, and that's tell me about yourself. Most interviewers will know right then and there if you're a good candidate for that role. And what typically tends to translate is they start to lean in and become more engaged, depending on how you answer that question. So if you see somebody kind of nodding, okay, and they start smiling and they start kind of seeing that wall come down, not only does your wall come down, but you'll start to see them kind of leaning in and really identifying because they're starting to relate with what you're saying in your answers. So your first tip is really understanding, are you watching the interviewer's body language? Do they remain stiff, or does the wall typically tend to start to come down? All right, imagine you're in an interview and you start to see the interviewer. What are they doing? How are they acting? Are they moving forward? But the number one key to have inside that is, are they starting to smile? And is your personality starting to vibe? Usually your interviews go first with the TA recruiter inside an interview on the phone, and those are typically easy to master to get to a second round. But the most important round that you want is to be in person, and typically that's with the person who's the direct hiring manager. If that hiring manager or if that recruiter is really leaning in, they start to smile and the conversation starts to land and they start to engage, that's your first good sign that the interview is going really, really well. The next tip that I have for you is, does the interview go longer than expected? So a lot of the times whenever you're interviewing, the interview typically is scheduled for 45 minutes to an hour. And this is really kind of that meet and greet session. Now, as you climb, this becomes a little bit trickier. And what I mean by trickier is sometimes interviews can last up to 8 to 10 hours. My longest interview that I've ever been on has been 11.5 hours. And you want to keep that in mind because typically as you progress and as you start to move up the ladder, your interviews last a little bit longer. But if you're on your entry level or you're in your middle management sector, a lot of the times the interviews will last 45 minutes to an hour. This is a really good sign because what it shows is that the interviewer, the hiring manager, is genuinely interested in you. So kind of how we talked about that body language, this is kind of that next piece to the puzzle. When the interview goes well, when that body language goes well, when you're starting to have really great conversations, often the interview goes longer than expected because they're interested in understanding what you're saying, but then more so, they're interested in how you're fitting into the culture, the organization, and their team. What often happens inside this as well is they're often starting to ask detailed questions on how you would handle those situations and maybe even bringing up different types of projects that are coming up and how you would go about handling them and how you're going to fit inside that realm. All right, the next tip that I have for you is when you're introduced to other team members on an interview. Now, this can happen on the first or the second interview. Typically, if the interview goes really, really well, you're going to be introduced or you're going to be shown inside the platform, whether it's an office space, whether it's a warehouse. Those are two typical areas where if an interview likes you or a hiring manager typically tends to like you, what they're going to do is they're going to take you around and they're going to introduce you to different people. What this does is it shows that, hey, I like the person, but does my team like the person as well? Because it is a shared space and people want to have a secondary opinion of what your first impression is when you get introduced around an office. And this is very important on how you present yourself. Did you present yourself well inside that interview? You want to make sure that you present yourself well to all the different people that you're introduced to. But this is also a really good sign that you may have gotten the job or that you're one of the final candidates. Tip number 4. When they start to discuss compensation and benefits, this is a really good sign. So a lot of the time, whenever you're talking to a hiring manager and they start to really dive in and they start to talk about salary, they start to talk about benefits, what are you looking for, and this goes beyond the phone interview, what typically happens is that they're actually very interested and they want to make sure that the compensations align to what they're able to pay. When they talk about benefits, time off, what you're looking for, these are really good cues that they are very, very invested in you, and it's a really good sign. My last tip for you is when you're asked about your availability and your start date. So if you're inside the interview and an interviewer is asking you about your availability and your start date, these are really great signs because they're genuinely interested and they see you as part of that role. If they're asking you for your availability, you want to remember that you always, if you're working at a present company, you want to make sure that you say 2 weeks because those things are really important. You want to make sure that you're giving your current employer the respect that you're about to give your new employer. And those are key elements that often are takeaways for a hiring manager if somebody says that they can start Monday, but they're currently employed. You want to make sure that you give a 2-week notice or a 3-week notice to make sure that you give that respect to the prior employer. But if you're asked about your availability or your current start date, this is a telltale sign that it is a sure sign that they're very, very interested in you. While there's no guarantee that you've landed the job, these are all different signs that are going to help you hone in to being able to clue in if you did get the job or if you didn't get the job. I hope these have helped you. That's it for this video. Between now and my next video, you're more than welcome to again check out my website, jenniferfallon.com, where I host a tremendous amount of different blog articles that can help you out in being able to further your career. If you're more interested in audio, my podcast, the Career Vault Podcast, is available on Apple, Spotify, and Amazon Music for you to be able to download and listen to on your car ride to work. I also have my on-demand masterclass, A Pathway to 100K, for those of you who are interested in breaking through to that 6-figure salary. And recently, I've just uploaded coaching sessions and one-on-one sessions available at an hourly rate, as well as my availability for you to be able to book on demand. I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.